It Chapter 2 is where it ends, and it's the second part to the first movie where the Losers Club finally returns to Maine and takes down the evil Pennywise after 27 years. I probably made that a lot more dramatic than it had to be, but maybe that's one of the problems I already have with this film. Both the first It and this one are just mostly all about style, and there isn't really much actual fear involved. Do you ever watch those cooking shows where, like Man vs. Food is kind of a good example, where things are so ridiculous and they're so over the top that it kind of loses its power. Like any kind of appetizing quality that that food might have had is completely gone just due to the sheer obnoxious presentation and content of the food. One of my favorite foods is hamburgers, as I'm sure it is for many of you. But if I were to get a hamburger that was like 6 or 7 patties and had like 8 strips of bacon and mayonnaise was oozing out the sides and it was just like thumped down in front of me, it would be totally gross. And when it comes to horror movies, less is more. I think that the scariest scene in the first It was the drain scene, the opening one. And I'm not even really spoiling anything because, I mean, come on, you know the scene. It's when Billy's little brother, Georgie, sees Pennywise in the drain. And the reason why it's the scariest is because we see Pennywise in his real form. The sheer evil of him luring the most innocent creatures in the world, children, into his mouth. He wants to eat them. He wants to literally consume kids. And it's so scary because you know what's happening and you just kind of slowly retract into your seat as it unfolds before your very eyes. There's nothing obnoxious about it. There's nothing that is over the top about it. And that's what makes it so scary, is that your mind is filling in the blanks. A great classroom management technique for you teachers out there is that if you want the attention of your kids, sometimes you actually have to talk quieter than talk louder. It totally goes against your instinct, but it's just another illustration of what I'm saying, is that sometimes less is more, especially with horror films. When you allow the audience to fill in the blank, when you allow them to engage with the film in their own way rather than telling them that it's scary, it's just scarier. There are some scenes in this movie that had so much blood, that had so much screaming, that had so much loud music, that I actually took notice that my heart wasn't beating at all. I was sitting there, I'm like, I feel completely calm because this is so over the top that it has lost all of its power. I will say that the first 30 minutes were really strong. It was a really great opening scene, very scary, totally sucked you in, had you mesmerized with the reappearance of Pennywise and the death of a few characters. It was really good. It not only was scary, but it sucked you into the story, and it really had me. It had me. Then once you get into the second act, which is about an hour, that also starts off really strong. But eventually you begin to realize that it's just a series of vignettes that kind of focuses on each character at a time. And eventually you just start to think, oh, okay, this character, now it's their turn to have some flashback. Now it's their turn to be scared of something that is ultimately inconsequential. And that's where the runtime becomes a little obnoxious too. It's close to 3 hours. It's like 2 hours and 48 minutes. And there were just some scenes that could have been deleted. I guess they would have been good for like deleted scenes in the DVD. But as it stands, to have them in the final cut, I mean, it's fun to watch, I guess, if you're a big horror fan and you just want to see those, you know, that nasty imagery or that gore or whatever. But as far as it contributes to the story, it can get a little overdone at times. And the very last part of this film, about 30 minutes, the big final showdown with Pennywise, from a visual standpoint, it's pretty spectacular. From an emotional standpoint, it actually hit me harder than I thought it was going to. But that's about it. Again, it was just so over the top that you really weren't that scared, especially since you knew how it was going to end. And the way that the characters fought Pennywise, at some point it was just, I don't know, it felt like a bunch of school kids like fighting a bully. There were actually a few audience members, myself included, that began kind of chuckling at the way they were fighting him. It just wasn't very effective. The obvious standout in the group of adults is Bill Hader. This dude totally encapsulates the younger version of his character. He's really funny, he has a potty mouth, he's got the glasses. I mean, he just nails every mannerism, and he definitely got the biggest laughs out of any character. because he had the biggest personality. I mean, he was the fan favorite when he was a kid, and he's the fan favorite now. And I will say that the casting director, whoever he or she was, did a really fantastic job in choosing these actors and actresses, because they literally look like their younger counterparts. Like, they have the same eyes, the same jawline, the same mannerisms as their younger selves. It was actually very impressive. I can imagine that it must have been a rather daunting task for the casting director to be like, okay, we need adult versions of these kids, and they have to be good actors, and they have to have the same physical features, or at least physical features that are convincing enough to make it seem like they've grown up. Hope you're up to the task, but I gotta say, they pretty much nailed it, so good on them. Appearances aren't everything, of course, and like I said, Bill Hader was the obvious standout. There were a few that were close to being duds, but I'll let you decide exactly who they were. There's also a lot of unnecessary romance in this movie. It's just totally cheesy, totally forced, completely detracts from the story. It's just some nostalgic throwback to the first one. It doesn't work. Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise is incredible, of course. And it's so amazing how a guy who looks like this can play a character that looks like this. But he was just having an absolute blast in this role. And I mean, I can tell just because of how much he was into it. But at the same time, maybe he was getting a little too into it, because I heard plenty of stories of him having nightmares even after shooting wrapped up. And I mean, if you're getting into a character that's that evil and that scary, even if it's you playing that character, I'm sure it's just as disturbing seeing yourself in the mirror as that character than it is the very first time. So the fact that he had nightmares based off playing that character doesn't really surprise me. But thank you, sir, for a wonderful and very entertaining performance as that character, and I wish you all the best in what is sure to be many, many of your future endeavors. I don't think I wasted my money when I watched this. I mean, it was a decent, solid time at the theater. I just felt like they could have really done a lot more. They really could have trimmed it up. They could have tightened the screenplay. They could have taken out 75% of all the jump scares, and they could have just made it a little more subtle. But, maybe that's asking for too much. And I'm going to give this one a 7.6 out of 10. Yeah, that sounds about right. So have you seen It Chapter 2? If you have, what'd you think about it? Let me know it down in the comments below. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. I truly appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next cinematic adventure.